we do not have a strong lobby. We have no one making our arguments for us. Yet 1% of the nation feeds the rest of the folks, and judging from the looks of the rest of the folks, we're doing a pretty good job. But the only thing that we've done right is that America has not exported its ability to feed itself. And what is so ironic, because I sit 80 miles, my ranch is 80 miles away from the city of Houston, which kind of grows like a cancer on the face of the earth. You know, we keep pouring concrete over the best agricultural land. Well, if you keep moving us west, and you know what I'm talking about west, if you keep moving us west, then pretty soon my ranch will be in the middle of West Texas, meaning instead of running 3 cows to an acre, I'll be running 3 cows to a section, and it doesn't work anymore. So people, I think, need to appreciate that one of the strengths, one of the few things that we have done right, Republicans and Democrats, is we have continued to let farmers and private citizens own land to grow and feed us. Now, it's getting harder and harder and harder to do that every day. And someone needs to wake up. But who wants to wake up and concern themselves with 1% of the nation? This ethanol stuff about turning corn into fuel, well, if you want a good investment tip, I suggest, particularly given the drought we're having here in Texas, I suggest you go down to your butcher shop and order a half a side of beef and put it in your freezer, because you are going to be dollars ahead 6 months from now.
Well, you know, I did that for years in New Mexico, when I had my land there in Bingham, New Mexico. And it was because of that I came up with a plan that I thought would take back this country. And it was called Liberty Villages. Because if we grew our own food, raise our own food, and provide our own energy from the sun and the wind, just like we did it across Texas for hundreds of years.
Right.
With the technology we've got today, we can be in touch with everywhere, and if you're growing your own food and providing your own energy, you don't need the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, or the Jacob Schiffs out there for nothing.
No.
And I believe they tried to kill me over that idea, which I had in the centerfold of my magazine, which was going in every Barnes & Noble across the country.
Right.
And are they that afraid of that? Is this why they went after the South? We were growing our own food. We didn't need the North and their industrial capacity for nothing.
Yeah, it was a threat, because to be brutally candid about it, in 1850, 1860, we had nothing in common with the North. The North had nothing in common with us. I mean, we were just 99% agrarian. We did not have a manufacturing concern, and really didn't want it, didn't even encourage it. You know, we were happy growing cotton and living our lifestyle. But remember, what did the North need? Well, the North needed customers. You know, they needed to sell, you know, their manufactured goods. They needed that kind of stuff. You know, so long story short, I often wondered why didn't they just let them go? I mean, we still would have been friends. I mean, we were united by a common language. We had a basic common culture. But once you decide that certain provisions of the Constitution don't work and you're going to ignore them, then why don't you just recognize that you've breached the contract and let the guys go? You know, there's no question that secession was legal. I mean, Massachusetts wanted to do it, you know, 3 or 4 years after the Constitution was ratified. So you have to sit there and say, well, okay, why did they fight so hard to keep the Union together? Well, they fought so hard to keep the Union together because it made economic sense to keep the Union together. if they had let the South simply walk off, the South's relationship with England would have supported the South forever. The South would have traded cotton for the manufactured goods that England. England was going through the same industrial revolution and stuff that New England was, and so New England would have lost all their customers because you would have just been bartering cotton for manufactured goods. That's why they stayed. I mean, we now hear through contemporary historians that this was a war for freedom of the slaves. No, it wasn't a war for freedom of the slaves until the Emancipation Proclamation. And that was a political decision on Lincoln's part to take the high road, and then it would fall in line with the abolitionist movement that was in full bloom in England at that time. At that point, it nullified England's interest in coming to the aid of the South.
What about now? What are we going through now? Do you see any answers to first of all, we've got and our founding fathers warned us, if you ever allow a private bank to issue your money, the banks and the corporations that spring up around them will leave your children homeless in the land we conquered. And we lost a lot of farms. Before the First Depression, about 40% of Americans lived or worked on farms or ranches, didn't they?
Yes, the scales tilted in the 1920s. Up until the late 1920s, over 50% of America was involved in agriculture. After 1927, 28, or something like that, then more, it was less than 50%. I really come back to this attitude of hate. You know, if you're going to develop policies based upon class envy, or based upon jealousy, or based upon some type of envy or retribution, you are going to fall back into what we fell back into 150 years ago, and that is violence. I was doing a radio talk show host show in Orlando, Florida, and I was staggered when I started talking about Reconstruction and my book and everything. I was staggered at how really, really angry people are about the fact that 50% of Americans don't pay any tax at all. Well, I didn't get the memo. I don't know how in the world that ever got created. I guess I was just asleep at the switch, you know. But I didn't learn that until this last presidential election, that 50% of Americans don't pay any income tax at all. Well, you know, you can't keep a country in balance if 50% are in the wagon and 50% are pulling the wagon. You know, sooner or later the scales tip one way or the other. If they tip the wrong way, then the folks that are pulling the wagon just simply say, forget it. I think that's what a lot of our policies are based on. If you're a hater, you know, Andrew Jackson was one of America's great true haters. You know, if you crossed Jackson, he was going to have a grudge until the day he died. If you are one of those people who enjoy hating other people, then you're living at the right time. Because it seems to me we got all kinds of different groups hating all kinds of different groups.
But that's what they do. And you know, Andrew, in defense of Andrew Jackson, you know, he did kick the banks, the central banks, out of the country.
Right, yeah,
But that's what they do. I mean, I get that a lot. I'm accused of being a hater. I don't care what race you are. I don't care what religion you are. You know, I'm from Texas. You know, don't slap a woman in front of me because I'll return the favor. You know.
Right.
That's all.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of remarkable. We are trundling down the same backstretch. I mean, there's no question about it. I'm real curious to see how this next presidential election plays out, because the way it's shaping up, you know that it's going to be a very, very dirty, vicious, backbiting campaign. And I don't know how you heal from it. You know, they talk about, you know, all this stuff that goes on in Washington. You know, my God, I guess there's not a cause of action for congressional malpractice There's medical malpractice and legal malpractice and all kinds of other malpractice, but there's no cause of action for congressional malpractice, and yet you can look at what Congress has done over the past 30 years, 40 years. I'm not trying to pick Democrat or Republican administrations. What have they gotten right? I mean, do we have a successful program at all in the last 40 years? And don't tell me that Social Security's been successful, it's broke. And don't tell me Medicare is successful, it's broke.
We've been in a communist country since 1913.
Yeah,
Every plank on the Communist Manifesto intact in America today. I don't even know who won the Cold War.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I mean, and it's pretty sad when we're thumbing a ride with the Russians to get back up to the space station that we paid for, and Putin is calling us a bunch of parasites. I mean, how far do we have to fall before the average American wakes up and gets upset about this stuff?
Are you aware of Obama's latest executive order?
Probably not. Every time I see him on TV, I tend to turn it off. So.
He has put an executive order saying now that the rural communities are the backbone of America. There's just tremendous economic potential in those rural areas. So the federal government, he's created a committee to come into the rural areas to organize you ranchers and you farmers out there, so the federal government can fund some of your operations. And that means kind of like becoming a 501c3. They can tell you what you can grow, tell you what you can do, and tell you when you can do it.
Well, the fascinating thing about being a rancher is that there is not a more independent group of cusses left in America. I mean, if you ride from ranch to ranch just in my area, you will get a different alcohol at every single one of them. Now, sometimes that works to our great disadvantage, but I know down here in Texas, we can't hardly stand the federal government anymore. It's get out of our life. No, we don't want it. They have one of those soil conservation groups in the general area, and it's a two-man office that covers 1 jillion acres, and I don't think they do anything. But trying to organize us ranchers is going to be a little bit like trying to organize the Comanche Indian tribe.
Yeah, I refer to the same thing about bikers. It's a little like herding cats.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. That is true. It's scary to me. Like I say, the only thing we've done right so far is that we haven't exported our ability to grow our own food. The day we do that, then we're all just a bunch of serfs.
Now, let me ask you, the whole concept behind Liberty Villages is to boost up and to back up and to strengthen the self-sufficient family farm. Now, anytime you're working a ranch or a farm and you're by yourself and you don't have 8 kids running around to help, you're a little overworked. So,
yeah.
As we've also got a lot of veterans out there that are homeless right now. I think that's a real American tragedy. But what if the ranchers organized and said, look, each ranch here, we're going to set aside 5 acres to provide homes for veterans. We got 1 million families that have been kicked out of their homes while the bankers got the money. And if the ranchers set aside 5 acres near a roadside, so you can put up low-cost structures, whether they're teepees, yurts, or mud homes, would the ranchers be willing to teach these people how to be self-sufficient, how to plant the gardens, how to handle the animals, so how to raise chickens without torturing them?
Clay, let me give you a dose of just what happens right in this area. In Texas, the average age of the average rancher in Texas is 65 years old. Okay, I run my ranch pretty much by myself. There's another ranching family, and we work together. So there's between myself on my ranch and the 3 on theirs, there's 4 of us who work our cattle together. And the rest of the time it's just me. You know, if the water main breaks, if the bull's out or whatever, it's just me. And the reason it's just me is because the young people around here, and there are a lot of young people. I mean, I'm within 35 miles of Texas A&M, 20 miles of Sam Houston State. Both have ag deals. The young people don't want to get dirty. I'm sorry that, you know, if you're a rancher, I spend in East Texas, I spend more time with the chainsaw in my hand than I do with a cow prod, cutting down dying pine trees. So the problem is not the willingness on the part of the ranchers. I mean, the ranchers are desperate for help. 60% of the vet students at Texas A&M now are going to go into small animal veterinary medicine. We have towns in West Texas that will pay for a kid to go to A&M and become a large animal vet and go back home. I don't see any interest amongst the younger generation in getting dirty and working with your hands.
We may have to generate that. Can we, do you mind if we take some calls here?
No, go ahead.
All right. Hello, 310 area code. Would you like to speak with Joe Bax or Clay Douglas? Whoops. Okay. Then you're off. Let's see if this one. Hello, 918 area code.
Hello, Clay. This is Ann.
Hello, Ann. You're on with Joe Bax. He's a rancher in Texas. Written a book called The General in Monteville, Texas. Have you been listening?
Yeah, I turned in a few minutes late, but yes, I've been listening. It's interesting. Something else about the Reconstruction. Something else about that era. I don't know if you mentioned, but when the reason that was under martial law was when the South seceded, the senators and representatives, of course, left the Congress. And some of them in the New England states left also, without first, and then, so the Congress left, but they did not first, by parliamentary procedure, determine a proper recess and date for reconvening. So we were left without a Congress, and that's why Lincoln made that executive order to take over so that the country could still be run.
Is that accurate, Joe?
Yes and no. The fact that the Congress doesn't necessarily designate a reconvening time is not going to be determinative of much. When you talk about Reconstruction, you really have to divide it into 2 phases. Reconstruction before 1866, which was kind of what you would call Lincoln-Johnson Reconstruction, which really had no major military districts, and then Congressional Reconstruction, which occurs after the midterm elections of 1866, and that's where you really get your military influence. The other thing that you also have to divide, and this is very, very interesting, I operate under the theory that human nature hasn't changed in 5,000 years. The South gets castigated for Reconstruction being very, very violent, the origins of the Ku Klux Klan and all of that stuff, and I speak to that in the General in Monteville, Texas. But none of that really starts. That doesn't start in 1865. It doesn't even start in 1866. During that time, you pretty much have folks trying to figure out how you're going to put food on the plate. The violence starts with 1866 midterm elections and the creation of Congressional Reconstruction. That's when the violence starts. And it's kind of interesting because I've talked about hate a lot. You know, when you implement a program based upon hate, like Congress did in 1866, the reciprocity is coming right back at you. So really, when I talk about the military influence, I'm talking about congressional Reconstruction after 1866.
All right, and thank you for your call, and I appreciate your input. So hang on there, and let me take another caller. And 978 area code. Who do we have here? Did you want to talk with JoeBax or Clay Douglas? No, too shy to talk. Okay. All right, Joe. This whole thing, my concept of Liberty Villages, would ranchers, if you said, okay, we can make this productive, we can put a restaurant up here, we can put some teepees or yurts or something, own this little 5 acres to house workers, would the ranchers be willing to train the workers and use the workers on a cooperative venture?
Oh, I think so. I mean, my point is that when you look for labor, the rancher looking for labor, there isn't any labor interested in working on a ranch. So if the trade-off was an apprenticeship in some form or fashion, that doesn't disturb anybody. In fact, a lot of your agricultural magazines, if you read Progressive Farmer or any of them, they're always talking about how the old guy, and I'm now 63, so I'm rapidly becoming one of the old guys, how the old guys step out of the physical demanding day-to-day operation of a ranch or a farm and transfer it to another generation, whether it be a veteran or whether it be somebody else. That's a real issue in agriculture because, as I told you, average age of a rancher in Texas is 65. And but here locally, and I think I can speak for a lot of folks across Texas, the young people want a cleaner environment. They don't want to be out here in the mud, the blood, and the beer like we get. And you don't find many of them interested. Even those who grew up on farms, they're glad that old Dad still got his cows and can get on a horse and go out and do what Dad wants to do. But me, I think I want to be a banker in Dallas. So that's a problem. I mean, Clay, you're gonna have to get somebody interested in doing the type of work that we do.
Well, I think what the segment I'm really shooting for here is young families that just lost their house, they've lost their job. We got a million of those out here. We got veterans. We got veterans here. If I can offer a veteran a roof over his head, a campfire out in the middle of a teepee, and if he milks the goats and picks up the eggs and mends a fence or two, then I think it's a cooperative venture, and I think it's also, if we're concentrating on raising our food, growing our food, I mean, they're poisoning us, Joe. It's worse today than it's ever been. They are poisoning us with the genetically modified crops and even the cattle. I mean, I lived, my sons grew up on range-fed beef. They were very, very healthy.
Right. Right. Well, all I'm saying to you is that I don't find many folks, certainly not in our area, who want to get dirty. And part of that is that if I were to do something like you're suggesting, in a way, I'm competing with the federal government and all of their programs of subsidies and handouts and, free this and free that. I love being a rancher. I love the life. I love being outdoors. I like interacting with the cow. I much prefer interacting with my cow herd than most folks. They seem to show a great deal more common sense. But that being said, I sometimes think that I'm just a throwback, and that our two girls, left the ranch and headed to Austin, Texas, for white collar jobs. So
I'm always struck about the song. How you gonna get them back on the farm after they've seen L.A.?
Yeah, well, you're not. You're not. I think you have a more interested audience in folks that have done the white-collar grind for 20 years and then wake up and say, I wasn't put on the earth to earn the last dollar bill printed. Maybe I want to go become a rancher. That may be where we need to do our apprenticeship. Guys that are 45 and 50 and want to go do something different. Because
I'm a couple of years older than you. My first magazine was High Country, High Adventure for Today's Cowboy. Mm-hmm. And I can ride a horse as well as I can my Harley.
Right. Well, I do think there's a market there. I was speaking with one of my high school buddies who was a shrink, and he got tired of listening to everybody's problems, and he's opening up a vineyard, out in Fredericksburg, Texas. And I think that might be the future of agriculture, because, good God, to try to get a kid nowadays interested in really doing manual labor. Well, first of all, most of them are going to wilt under the sun and any type of real strenuous physical activity. So that's a tough road.
Yep. Well, consider it a better alternative than boot camp.
Yeah, it is.
and it's also a better alternative, to spending years in jail. So
yeah.
I think I think it could. How would you reach? How would we reach the ranchers if we can do this as a group? Then you've got a little bit of strength, and you've got some political backing.
I think you start with like a big organization like the American Beef Cattlemen's Association, or you start with the Texas and Southwest Cattle Raisers Association, and try to get their boards interested. I mean, it's fascinating. I'm a member of the Texas and Southwest Cattle Raisers Association, and their Cattlemen's magazine comes out once a month. And they've got some pretty astute members on their board. They stay on top of legislative issues, and once a year they put out a review of their own magazine. Who reads it? How many of us are owners, and how big are our herds, and what did we buy this year? Did we buy a pickup or buy a squeeze chute or whatever? And those guys have got a lot of influence. And one of the problems that we are all aware of is the grain of the agricultural worker. I mean, we're just getting old. I'm fortunate that I'm pretty healthy and I can still bounce around at age 63, but it only takes one bull to really rack me up, and I might not be able to do that. So that might be where you start with your program, if you get folks to do that.
Well, that's exactly what I'm working on right now, and I really appreciate having you on my show. Now, people can get your book at Amazon.com.
Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com, or you can order it through any local bookseller, and it's also available both in printed and electronic versions for those folks who have Kindle and those other things.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Tell you what, you send me electronic version of that. I'll send you one of Mystery Babylon and my One Bloody Alabaster Eye. That's my fiction.
Very good. I'll do that.
And I would like to stay in touch with you, have you back on the show, because right now, foreign corporations and Obama are targeting the rural areas, and I've kind of gone through that. They wanted to zone my little 5-acre plot of land out there in New Mexico, and you're going to come out here and zone. You want